So, before starting the video, I just wanted to mention the fact that I like Season 4 of Stranger Things even less since writing the script for this, and take all the criticisms I say even harsher, probably. And with that in mind, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get into the video. When Stranger Things came onto the scene, it was just different. An escape from the drawn-out and commercial-filled cable TV was overdue. Netflix already had popular shows releasing like Orange is the New Black, but again, Stranger Things was just different. I don't know if there's a way to prove it's the show that revolutionized streaming in the last few years, but it just kind of feels like a fact. Once those first 8 episodes released and the whole world binged them, dozens of shows on various services followed suit. Shows started to be for binging, even if the episodes released weekly, the format had changed. Then those seemingly obvious flaws of cable TV became clearer. As the shows taking over were way shorter, the long seasons and episodes of cable TV became too much. People hate shows like Riverdale because, they're bad, but there's a deeper reason than that. Cable networks like the CW force these shows to be 22-hour-long episodes a season, a pretty long way to see some teenagers solve a mystery, and obviously they're gonna do some pretty weird stuff to make it interesting. Making a consistently good show is feasible when it isn't written to fill up a time slot, and most shows on cable networks were. Shows like Stranger Things or even Barry, which released weekly but mainly for streaming, could have varying episode lengths, making it obvious they took exactly as long as they needed. Shows meant for network television can't do this trying to coincide with frickin' commercial breaks. With all this said, after pushing television past those flaws of cable TV, Stranger Things fell into the same trap. The reviews of Season 4 have been pretty overwhelmingly positive so far, but I really wonder how we'll look at it in the future. Along with perfecting shows to binge came Netflix often being better at face value. Season 3 of Stranger Things, the way I remember it at least, was the popular pick for the best season when it came out. After a lot of time passed though, people often gravitated back to Season 1. I guess watching a show with no breaks just doesn't allow much time for criticism. When the audience is always wanting more, they have more appreciation for what's already there. This is part of Netflix and Stranger Things magic that I think has just gotten a bit lost. This season while watching Stranger Things, I couldn't stop thinking about what should be happening. Not only does the overall theme just seem a little off, which I'll get into later, but there are smaller aspects that represent this. The show forces scenes for the most payoff instead of the best build-up for one. I feel like the best example of this is how Dustin has this new relationship with this new character Eddie, and it kind of just replaces his relationship with Steve. At the end of this season, when Dustin and the new character Eddie go into the Upside Down together, I really get this feeling. This is the season where a lot of the younger characters are forced to mature, and this period for Dustin is crucial in that. He loses an older mentor figure and moves on with a sense of responsibility because of his friend's sacrifice. I don't know what the writers are thinking, but this whole moment and adventure seems like it was for Dustin and Steve. His best friend's sacrifice forcing his maturity? I don't know. Eddie's death scene is fine. He proves to himself that he isn't a coward, but it just isn't that emotional when the insecurity was introduced like 2 episodes ago. I just don't care about Eddie that much. Thinking about how jarring the same exact scene would have been with Steve as the one sacrificing himself for Dustin just makes this feel hollow. Who cares about this Eddie guy? Anyway, when I think about why Steve couldn't be the one there with Dustin in the climax, I feel even worse. After the show had decided to go an unexpected and more interesting direction with Nancy and Steve throughout, this season says, fuck that, they're hot, so they'll be the couple. It's cheap. The kind of story making the same mistakes as old TV, using whatever plot lines can make the most headlines. But this different style, the tendency to go left when others went right, was what made this show the headline it was in the first place. And now they're losing that. I feel like once a show starts rehashing the same plot developments, it's hard for that not to be where it hits a wall. This is a sign of a show in its twilight, these same flaws cable TV falls into of just having too much content. Another and even worse sign are flat out bad plot developments that don't make any sense. The most common thing I've heard about this season is how it's one of the best despite the rough beginning. It's easy to brush the first episode or 2 under the rug when discussing the season, but that doesn't really make it any better. My least favorite part of this season is Eleven's brief time in California, and I think it's also most people's least favorite part. With as thoughtless as any new characters are in this section, it's clear they got lazy with the writing, which is something Stranger Things hasn't really done before. It's clear within minutes that the storyline in California probably won't go anywhere because there's such a lack of depth. This ignorance of certain storylines is another pitfall of TV once it drags on, not having enough good content for the time given. Eleven's rough start to the season is initiated by her bully. I would just tell you her name, but her first scene is in class when Eleven is presenting, and she just starts berating Eleven in the worst ways possible about her, dead father. The writers are just looking for the easiest way to make someone be the type of person to drive Eleven into a more violent version of herself, which is something they need for this season. I'll touch on that Eleven thing later, but the way the bully does this is freaking insane. Comically, evil bullies seem to be more of a thing in the 80s, or at least in TV, but even in this same show, there's better examples of how to do this. In Season 1, the main gang had 2 bullies who were seemingly aggressive for no reason. But with the context of that season, it could be made clear that this was more a result of a rivalry that had built up and become one-sided over the years. It's a subtle difference, but when someone starts verbally abusing the new student, it just kind of feels ingenuine. This bully continues to act in ridiculous ways by destroying Eleven's project in front of the whole school or making fun of her dead dad again. Of course, this minor antagonist is only so ridiculous so Eleven can be even crazier in return. The straight up bad storyline that doesn't make any sense that I was talking about is mostly referring to the direction of choice for Eleven this season. Only not having her powers for what feels like an hour of screen time before this season, the show really tries to force that characterization. After spending 3 seasons building Eleven as a shy and reserved character whose first priority is to protect her friends and herself, they throw that out the window. Basically, all of this is for the ultimate purpose of making a twist that number 1 was who killed all of the other test subjects before Eleven's escape. But for us to think Eleven is even capable of this in the first place, her initial arc is this belief that she's somehow a monster. Suddenly she goes from that reserved little girl to someone trying to muster her remaining power to kill someone in public, in front of her whole new school. After that doesn't work and the girl keeps bullying her, she resorts to hitting the girl in the head with a rollerblade and maybe almost killing her and then getting arrested. Someone who's been known to fly under the radar and who literally withstood years of torture, by the way, gets herself arrested within days. Admittedly, I think when Eleven hits her bully on the head with that rollerblade, it's one of the best oh shit moments I've ever seen in the show. I think the idea of her lack of power driving her a little crazy is an idea that could have worked, but with all these aspects of the season forced for a newly decided plot, it doesn't really get the opportunity. Another purpose of this California section is to make the 2 dudes abducting and torturing children look a little more like good guys. Believe it or not. Eleven's real arc for the season starts as this vague mad scientist portion of the government whisk her away from the cops arresting her, and not only do they gain some sort of our trust by rescuing her and being beneficial this season, but Eleven's flashbacks also make them look better. Not only does the flashback to the massacre at the lab make Eleven look like a psychopath at first, but it also focuses on how much Papa, the guy who, again, was torturing these kids, cares about them. Others will continually bring up his hypocritical treatment of people, but he doesn't only make an excuse to them, but to the whole audience as it's framed as being okay because what he does is out of love. All of this, again, being to make this new Henry or number 1 character eventually look like the real villain. Including these characters in this way just feels weird when it didn't have to happen. I know Papa would have to return eventually to tie up the loose end, but there has to be a better way. I wish they would just stick to this world and the Upside Down feeling like a bunch of connected but separate events, but instead they make this new main villain behind everything the whole time. It sounds like a pretty cliche mistake. They overdo this connection more throughout the season in ways that just kind of ruin plot lines. The importance of Hopper and Joyce's mission in Russia is forced more and more as the season goes on, and it makes it feel less and less grounded. Stranger Things is in such a good position that they have 2 characters we care about enough to watch a whole storyline with them completely separate from the main one. People cared about Hopper so much the internet drove Netflix to do a major story reveal with his revival in the goddamn trailer. I honestly wonder if any other show has ever killed someone or brought them back in a trailer or a commercial. With Stranger Things struggling to keep everything from being just too much for a show, it's definitely too much for this one plot. Every aspect of the show needing to be important at the end hurts it, with one focus being comically bringing everything together like an episode of Seinfeld. Basically, what I'm saying is a side plot about Hopper escaping from Russia is a cool storyline for 2 characters who don't fit into the main one. Once they're trying to convince me that shooting a Russian Demogorgon is going to hurt some all-powerful wizard having a fight in a random American girl's brain, they kinda lose me. Obviously, I'm picking and choosing the parts to criticize as a lot of this season was pretty good, I just think most of the positives are kind of confined to this season, with a lot of the good dialogue, moments, and character developments feeling like they only work in the context of this season. The things that carry over without much difference feel kind of out of touch. Will is largely still dealing with this feeling of being an outsider among his friends, but with that group barely even used in this season, his emotional scenes kind of came off as confusing at first. I honestly didn't know why he was crying in scenes like his conversation with Mike on their road trip. Blending these two conflicting directions of the show might have temporarily patched some holes, but it made it a lot messier. In this attempt to fix the show, they tried to sneak around us and change everything it's about. In that way, Stranger Things really did lose its magic.